And so if you look up here on the board, this is a little different than the other problems that we dealt with. Okay, the other problems that we dealt with were already in factored form, so it was like a quantity squared equals a quantity. This one isn't, and so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to use completing the square in order to put that into factored form. So first thing, the first step whenever I complete the square is to isolate the two terms in which you have a square term and a singular term. Does that make sense? Okay, so basically, find the square term, find its partner, isolate those. Everything else goes to the other side. So do you see what I've done? I've isolated the y squared and the y. Now, if it would have been the x squared and the x, we would have isolated those. Okay, but you're only going to have one squared term. So then now what I'm going to do is I notice I've got a 3y squared here. You can't have a 3y squared and complete the square. It needs to be a 1y squared. So what I'm going to do now is take out that 3. I'm just going to factor it out. Okay? So I'm going to just factor out that 3. So notice I had to take the 3 from the 6 as well. Yep, I'm leaving a space there for a reason. Okay? So now we can actually complete the square. To complete the square, remember I look at the y term here. And I take half of that. So what's half of 2? 1. I'm going to square that. And remember I write it as 1 squared, I don't just write it as 1. And then I'm going to add it to both sides. So real quick, when I add it over here, I've got to actually take it times the 3 as well. So I'm not just adding 1, I'm adding 3 times 1, which is 3. But I'll put it as 3 times 1 just because you're doing notes. Okay, so whatever number's on the outside, you're going to have to take that times whatever number's on the inside. If there's nothing on the outside, you don't have to worry about it. So on the left side, I have 3 times y plus 1 quantity squared. Okay. On the left side, I have 3. Remember, we did this with completing the square. I take the first term squared and the last term squared. Remember, that's why I write it as 1 squared and not 1. On the right side, if I add 3, I end up getting 12x minus what? 12. Okay. So then now, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to factor on the right side. So I've still got my 3 here. On the right side, I notice each of those has a what? 12. So I'm going to take that out, and I've got x what? Minus 1. Now the whole point in doing that is so that I can get it so I can see what my vertex is at. Now we've got one little issue, one thing that's still a little different from all the problems we had yesterday. And what do I need to get rid of in that yellow line? The 3. Yep, so I'm going to divide by 3. Nice job. Now on the left side, I still have y plus 1 quantity squared. On the right side, all you have to divide are the 12 and the 3. And you get 4. Okay, there. Now we can actually start the problem. Okay, so remember we start with the vertex. Vertex is where? 1, negative 1. Nice job. So I'm going to go to 1, negative 1, and I'm going to put a dot. 1, negative 1, negative. Now I got to figure out which direction it opens. Now in order to determine all of this, I am looking at the orange equation. I'm not looking anywhere else. And so is this graph going to be an up-down or a left-right? It's going to be a left-right. Why? Because it's y squared. X squared is always up-down. Y squared is always left-right. So now of these two, is it going to be left or right?
Right.
It's going to be right. Why? Because the 4 is positive. It's going to be right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just draw in my parabola that opens to the right. Now I need to find the focus, the directrix, and the axis. The axis I could probably find, but we've been finding it at the very end. But let's go ahead and start with the focus. I know the focus is located P away from the vertex. How do I find P?
4.
Yep. So I do 4P equals, in this case, this number here, which is 4. So what does P equal? 1. So that means the vertex is, or the focus is going to be here. What's going to be here? The directrix. Okay, remember the directrix in this case will be a horizontal or a vertical line? Vertical. Because remember, the directrix never touches the parabola. So now what I need to do is come up with equations for both. So let's go ahead and start with the focus. Where does the focus occur? What point? 2, -1. Yep. Directrix, where does that occur? Or what is that? X equals 0. Good. What's the only thing I don't have? The axis. So I've got to put the axis. I'm going to go ahead and put that axis right through here. Oh, I don't want that. I wanted a different color. Let's try this one.
Why do you have X?
Because it's a vertical line. So there's your axis. Where's your axis going to be? Y equals -1. Very good. Okay. See, that one went a little easier than the first two we did yesterday. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at what happens when you don't have an equation and you just know parts of the equation. Okay, so write an equation for and graph a parabola with focus 1, 3 and vertex 1, 6. Okay, I'll let you get that down and then we'll continue.
Maybe we just have to write
So now what we're going to do is we're going to start by graphing the focus and the vertex. Okay? So, focus 1, 3. So I'm just going to draw a quick graph here. Okay, so I know the focus is at 1, 3. We'll call that F. Vertex is at 1, 6. Oops, let's do a different color so you can kind of see that a little bit better. Here's the vertex. Okay. So just by graphing, you can tell what direction it opens. Down. Okay, there. So now we got to come up with an equation. So now you have 4 equations. Okay, you have them written. One for up, one for down, one for left, one for right. So the one for up and down should be this. X minus h quantity squared equals -4p times y minus k. Now, if it would have been up, it would have been positive 4p. Right? So that's the difference between the two. So now let's plug in what we know. Do I know what h is? Yes. H is part of the vertex. 1. X is 1. Right here. This is the point 1, 6, right? So when I plug it in my equation, it's actually going to be a -1. So then what's the y going to be? Instead of being a 6, it's going to be a -6. Yep. So that's just based on the vertex. Now we need to figure out what will go in place of p. Well, I know that this distance here is p. So how far is that? 3. So I'm going to plug 3 in here. So it really becomes negative what? 12. And there you go. A lot of it's analyzing, and it really helps to graph. If you have a graph there, a visual to help. Oh, let's go back. We're going to look at another one.
You don't have to find the answer.
Nope. All it said is write an equation. Write an equation for and graph a parabola with focus -3, -4. Opens down, and it contains the point 5, -10. Alrighty, so first things, it opens down, right? So if it opens down, we already know our equation. Okay. What's the equation going to be?
X minus.
X minus 3 squared equals
Negative
4p times y minus k.
1 minus k. Good. Okay. So far, so good?
Mhm.
All right, so let's kind of try and draw a graph, even though it's going to be kind of hard. So there's your focus. And then it contains the point 5, -10. So all the way down here. Okay, so first of all, I know my vertex is where in relation to the blue? Just in direction. Where would the vertex be? It's going to be what? Somewhere here, right? So somewhere along this line right here, because this is where my axis is. So I know that the vertex is going to have an x-coordinate of -3, right? Okay, so I already know that this has got to be x plus 3. What I don't know is what the y-coordinate is. I don't know what p is. I know that somewhere up here is going to be my vertex, or it could be anywhere above the blue. So basically what ends up happening is this distance is p, right? So whatever coordinate this is for y, this is actually -4. What I'm going to do is add p to get my new y-coordinate. So this is actually going to be located at -3 and then -4 plus p. So really I've got y minus, okay, and then this one will be -4 plus p. Alrighty, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sub in the point 5, -10. So put in 5 for x and -10 for y. Okay, so we're going to put in 5 for x and -10 for y. And by doing that, the only thing left will be p. So we're putting in 5 for x and -10 for y. So here I end up getting what? 64, good. Equals negative 4p, and now I need to simplify this. So this would be like plus, plus, and then minus. So really this is going to be negative 6 minus p. So I get 64 equals 24p plus 4p squared. What do I know about all the terms? Let's divide by 4. So I end up getting 16 to equal 6p plus p squared. That's a quadratic. So do we remember how we solve a quadratic? Yep. So basically I need to get everything over to one side and then I'll be able to factor. Good, you remembered that. So as you said, 2 factors of 16 that differ by 6. What are those? 2 and 8. Which one's positive? Which one's negative? 8's positive. 2's negative. So real quick, what does P have to be? P has to be 2. Okay. This is the thing. If P was negative, it's going to put your vertex down here, and it can't be. So P has to be the positive distance here because the graph opens down. So P is 2. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 2 here. That means this distance here is actually 2. So if that distance is 2, that means my vertex is here. And the coordinates of that vertex are actually at negative 3. Because it's 2. It's the distance of 2, remember, from my focus. This is my focus right here. So I know the distance is 2. So the vertex is actually at negative 3, negative 2. So now all I need to do is plug those into the red, and we're good to go. And yeah, this was a long problem, sorry, but that's okay. X plus 3 quantity squared equals negative 8 times y plus 2. No. Sorry. Okay. Real quick. This one is one, I don't know if you even need to write this down. Let's just pay attention and do this one in class without writing it down. Because this is one you can think of. It says determine the orientation of the parabola with directrix y equals 4. So all you're going to do here, y equals 4. What type of line? Horizontal. So here's the directrix right here. And P is negative 2. So if the directrix is here, y equals 4. Where will I go? So what's it going to do? Up and down. So far, so good? All right, let's look at this one. Write an equation for the parabola here. So first of all, the graph opens what? Down. So we have x minus h squared equals negative 4p y minus k. Somebody tell me what I plug in and where? 3 goes in for x, so it'll be x what? Minus 3. What is p? 1. P is this distance right here, which is 1. So really it equals negative times. There you go. So if you can get the graphs down, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
So the P is from the focus up to...
Always. And the P is always the distance from the vertex to the directrix as well. Okay, all right, so you were given this assignment yesterday, so you need to just go ahead and finish working on it and get that done. If you have questions, you need to make sure you ask.
Any questions?